Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. Glad you could make it to another episode of What's in the Shop. This week is another theme, and it's all about records that have airplanes on the cover. And my inspiration for that was because I keep looking at this first record, and I just always, I can't help but look at the cover. And it makes me think, what a weird cover. It's fascinating to me. And it made me think, what other records have airplanes on the cover? But let's get started with the one that started it all, and it is by Thelonious Monk and Solo Monk. Check that out. This came out in '64, I believe, right? Thelonious Monk, of course, famous jazz pianist, a classic, one of the big boys. Solo Monk, it's called Solo Monk because this is a collection of solo piano pieces that Monk did. In '64, around that time, he was playing with his quartet as well, and they recorded some pretty well-known live albums. But critics all agree the pieces that are on this album are far more superior and sound way better than recorded with a band. All Music Guide said this is actually the album to have by Thelonious when you want just, well, Solo Monk. Thelonious, a man and his piano. This is one of the classics you have to have. Fantastic cover, isn't it? That, looking at this record, always made me think, like I said, what other records have airplanes on the cover? I did know of one other that I had in the shop, and he's a favorite of mine, and that is Joe Walsh. Looky here. The smoker you drink, the player you get. Haha, Joe's a jokester. This is a play on words. They're supposedly making fun of the higher you get, better you play theory. Anyway, this is Joe's second album as a solo artist. It says Joe Walsh. It's actually Joe Walsh and Barnstorm. The band were upset because they weren't included, their name anywhere on the album cover, although they are on the back, and they broke up shortly thereafter. This album became a top 10 smash, his first as a solo artist actually, and that's mainly due to the single that's on this album, Rocky Mountain Way, which was a top 40 hit and is probably the best known song by Joe Walsh ever. Rocky Mountain Way, inspired one day while Joe Walsh was out mowing his lawn in Colorado, and he looked up and he could see snow on the top of the Rockies, and he thought, wow, what a great way of life, you know. This is so much better than the way I was living with the James Gang, which, bam, turned into the lyrics. Rocky Mountain Way, better than the way we had. You know that, you know those lyrics. That's the reason why. Out mowing his lawn, inspired to make the most famous song of his career. Great album, by the way. This is a quad pressing too, which isn't as easy to find as the regular stereo pressings. Great Joe Walsh record. Next up, the man who invented A&M Records. Great trumpeter, jazz trumpeter as well. Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. Going places. Herb was at the height of his career in '65. That's when he was just blowing up all over the place. He released 2 albums that year. The first was Whipped Cream, which we have in the shop, and everybody knows that album cover because of the sexy girl with the whipped cream all over it. Classic, #1 album. Same year, he put this out later that year. This too became a #1 album. So 2 #1 albums in '65. It's pretty awesome. Mainly due to some of the hits that were on this. Of course, it's just commercial appeal anyway. He was on a high at that time. One of the tracks, Spanish Flea, he won a Grammy for that one, which was used on The Dating Game. It also has Tijuana Taxi, which was used in The Simpsons, and for me, it's sentimental because there's a track on here, A Walk Through the Black Forest, which funnily enough was used by the grocery chain Piggly Wiggly for their commercials. Piggly Wiggly was a grocery chain in the South and the Midwest, and I remember going to that grocery store when I was a young kid at my grandma's house, Piggly Wiggly's, and thought it was just awesome. First grocery store that was self-service, by the way, Piggly Wiggly's. Next up, great boogie band. Their 4th album, Foghat, Rock and Roll Outlaws. Look at them. Trying to look like real badasses here. Funnily enough, they weren't quite as badass as they thought at this time. They actually rented this plane just for the photo shoot and put their logo on it so they could look really important. Not a big hit, this album, but it did go gold, and it does have 8 Days on the Road, which is awesome. Must have in the Foghat canon, as well as the super boogie track Chateau Lafitte 59 Boogie. which it does. This is an album of solid boogie tracks if you like that kind of stuff. And hey, if you love Foghat, you just need this record because, hey, it's a good Foghat record. Next up, the debut. Well, let me just say this. You can't do a theme on airplanes without having this band in it, because not only is there Airplane on the cover, but it's in their name. And I'm talking about Jefferson Airplane. This is their debut album that came out in '66, I think it was, and it's called Takes Off. This wasn't that big of an album. There's no big fancy singles on it or anything, but Crawdaddy magazine did say it was the most important rock album of 1966, even though there were some flaws and it wasn't that solid. And that was largely due in part to this was the first record to come out of the new rock scene of the Bay Area in San Francisco in the modern hippie day movement in '66. This kind of started it all. You'll notice, maybe not, there is no Grace Slick in here. That's because she came after this album came out. This is before the classic Jefferson Airplane lineup. The singer was actually Signe Tolley Anderson, who only sang for this album and left shortly after it was released. And there's one other band member, I think it was Skip, what was his name? Alex Skip Spence, I think it was. Those two members both left and then drafted in Grace, and I can't remember who the other person was that came in to form the classic Jefferson Airplane lineup. Of course, vocals for this album is mainly, this was when Marty Balin was undoubtedly the chief of Jefferson Airplane. Hey guys, thanks for taking time out to watch. I hope you learned something about some of these airplane themed albums. Just to let you know, if you're in the area, got lots of new titles coming out every week now because getting ready for Christmas. I'm still only open on the weekends because of the whole COVID nonsense, but you can always make an appointment to come midweek if you like. I'll come and open the store anytime for you that you want. You can always write me at noisyrecordsmx@hotmail.com or send a message, instant message, whatever you want to say here on Instagram on Instagram. Thanks again for watching. I hope you guys have a great week. Keep rocking and hope to see you this weekend.